Hello everyone, welcome to Green Learner. Today we are going to learn about Spring Data JPA, which is there to interact with database, and interaction with database is pretty important because we cannot think of any application without interaction with database. We will be storing data in database, we will be fetching the database as well as manipulating the data, and will query the database for the different requirements that we have. So this is the very first application about data JPA. So we are going to cover very basics about this. Okay, so let's get started with this first slide. First, we are going to understand JPA. What is JPA? It is the short form of Java Persistence API. API in itself is Java application programming interface, which describes the management of relational data in application using Java platform. Okay, so persistence, which is the this P keyword, Java persistence. In this keyword covers three areas. First, the API itself, which is JPA, the specification that a particular API is implementing, and Java persistence query language, which is to query database, and the relational object relational metadata that is used to interact with database when querying the database. Okay, so this is the short introduction about JPA. Next, what is Spring Data JPA? Spring Data JPA, part of larger Spring Data family. It is a subset of larger data family which is there, makes it easy to easily implement JPA based repositories. Okay, so it makes it easier to build Spring powered application that use data access technology. So it makes easier means you can easily save the data into database and fetch the database from you can fetch the data from database very easily. It removes the boilerplate code that you need to write while interacting with database, like creating the connection, closing the connection. So this Spring Data in the backend takes care of all those boilerplate codes. So you just have to focus on the business logic that you want to perform. As a developer, write repository interfaces and include custom finder methods that you want to find. Spring will provide the implementation in the backend automatically for that interface. It supports dynamic query execution, then ability to integrate custom data access code, what it is giving by default on above. In addition to that, you can write your own also. And validation of add query annotation. Add query annotation, we will see that we can perform the manipulation, we can fetch the data, we can update the data and perform custom query implementation by writing just a method and writing a query inside add query annotation, and its validation happens when your application is running. So you do not have to worry about when your application is running and there will be some problem. So if there is any problem in your query in mapping the data or in mapping the column names others, so it will be detected at runtime only. So you will be able to resolve that at very early stage of your application development. Okay, so CRUD repository. CRUD repository is the main focus here in our demo. The central interface in the Spring Data repository abstraction is repository. Repository, which is a marker interface. The interface acts primarily as a marker interface. This repository acts as a marker interface to capture the types, to work with, and to help you to discover interfaces that extends this one. Okay, so whatever data repositories are there, they extend this repository which is the marker interface, which shows that it is the whatever classes or interfaces are extending implementing this repository, they are going to interact with database. And the CRUD repository provides sophisticated CRUD: create, read, update, and delete. So it goes like this: create, read, update, and delete. So this is the short form CRUD functionality for the entity class that is being managed. So let's move ahead and create a sample project using starter Spring. Okay, and see this in action, whatever we saw in theory. Okay, so I'm going ahead to Chrome and this starter spring initializer, start spring IO. You go ahead here and I want Gradle project, latest version, comgl. I am naming this spring data demo. Okay, what dependency I need for web? I want to create some endpoints, REST endpoints, then not Swagger. Then for data, I want Spring Data JPA for CrudRepository. So that's it. With these two dependencies, we are done to create endpoints and interacting with database only. So I can explore this project and see what is there in build.gradle. So plugins and all this is there, dependency management is there, and this is there. Okay. So this build.gradle is there and this project structure is there. So I can see everything, right? So application.properties by default it's empty. Okay, so this just for the sake of time, I have already created a sample project by doing this. I'll explain that step by step. Okay, so let me move to IntelliJ IDEA. Okay, so this is the Spring Data demo that I have created in the same way that I am showing you here. Okay, so let me compare the build.gradle just to make sure that things are right. Okay, DevTools I have disabled it. Starter web, starter test comes automatically, and starter data JPA. Okay, one dependency I need MySQL connector is not coming with this start spring IO. I have to take that from Google. So you can go ahead and select MySQL connector Gradle dependency. You'll get that. Otherwise, you can take from here directly. Okay, and then Swagger dependency just to interact with our endpoint easily, so that I can hit my endpoint and get the data from database and other stuffs I can perform easily. So I already have made a video about Swagger and all these stuff, so you can go back and see all those videos. I'll post the link in the description box. Okay, so let's go ahead and move. This is the build.gradle I explained you, and let's move ahead to the properties file, what I have configured there. Resources application. So YAML and properties both give us the same functionality, but YAML is little more readable, so I have opted this. So I'll post the link about comparison about properties in YAML also. You can go ahead and look into that also. So Spring port, I have defined that server.port, servlet.context path. I have given this data demo. So context path gets appended with the URL. I'll show you in the when we will be hitting the demo. Then application name data demo, and this is the database data source related properties. So data source for MySQL, this is the URL that I need to give. This is the database that I want to interact, and this use SSL. It should be false, otherwise at the startup time it will create some issue in the starting. So that by default it needs SSL related stuff, so you have to configure it as false. Username, password, and driver class name you can give it. Okay, so this is MySQL, so your system should have MySQL. Okay, so you can go ahead and install the MySQL also, and some few points to consider. So before you start your Spring Boot application, you should have your MySQL running. So you can go to this services. To go here, you just search your services and enter it. You will get this screen. Okay, and then come to MySQL and start this service. Okay, next step, go to MySQL client, and enter the password that you have configured while installing MySQL. Okay, start it. Okay, and then only then you start your application. If you are not doing this, it will create some issue in starting your service, because when your application is running, it is trying to connect with your local database, whatever URL that we have given. So it should be running in running state so that it can connect with that. Okay, it was about database and application properties that you need to have. Then moving ahead, I'll explain about controller. So you were following with the earlier video. So it is same as user management app that I showed you earlier. So earlier we stored the data in local list, and then we faced and manipulated with that. And I have changed that part only. I have instead of list I am interacting with the database. Okay, so this is same. Just let me walk you through. User services, what it is going to return all the users in the system. It is going to return a single user which ID I am going to pass. It is going to create a user into the system, and this endpoint is going to update address, a single field address for that ID which you will pass from the URL, and delete user. It is going to delete the ID of user of that ID that you will pass. Okay, so let's go ahead from controller, move ahead towards user services. This is the interface, and go to implementation part. So it is interacting with the user repository. What it is doing, it is doing some logging and interacting with the repository. So same thing, find all user, find user by ID, add user, update and delete user by ID. So main stuff is happening at this point, user repository. Okay, what it is doing, CRUD repository I explained you. So it is the main interface that is doing for the things for me. So let's go into it and see it. Okay, so this is the public interface CRUD repository. Okay, and it is extending the repository, which is the marker interface, because it doesn't have any methods. That is why it is a marker interface. Okay, you can read this documentation also. So let me go back. User repository, if I go to this CRUD repository, I can see many methods here. Okay, it had save as extends, and I have to pass this entity, and it will save what it does, it saves the data into database. Save all, you can pass multiple entities, list of entities, it will save all the data into database. This save is for single object and it is for multiple object. Find by ID, it is going to return the entity or user or object, any object that you want to fetch that is in database by that ID. It will fetch that one. And exist by ID, it will check that if that entity is there, that ID is in database or not. And then find all, it will return all the objects, all the entities that are there in database that you are interacting, and find all by ID. So it will map that ID with the database, and as many as rows there are, that will be returned. Okay, so count, it will return total number of the entities that are there. Delete by ID, it is going to delete that user inside database, and delete, it is going to delete that entity if you pass that entity directly. Here what difference is, I am passing just ID, here I am passing the whole object. Delete all, self-explanatory. Okay, so these are already provided methods that are there in CRUD repository. So what I have to do, I have to create an interface and I have to extend this CRUD repository. We cannot directly use this repository, and then I have to pass entity. If I go here, it expects type T and ID. So it is the type of the object and it is the ID that it is expecting. I have to give the type. Okay, so let's go ahead. So user type I want, and long I want it as an ID, as primary key. Okay, if I go to user, it is the entity that is mapped with the database. Okay, so corresponding user should be present in database, that structure should be present in database. Okay, so let's understand this. Entity, it means if I go to documentation of this, it specifies that class is an entity. This annotation is applied to the entity class. Okay, it will map, it will understand that it is going to map with some table in database. I can give name of the table with which it is going to map user, and it is the ID. It will be considered as primary key and generated value. How the ID will be generated? Auto generated. So it will start from some value and get incremented after that. Then I want to specify columns. First name, I can give the name of the column. Last name, this last name. If I am not specifying name of the column, it will take the field, that field as the name of the column and map accordingly. Okay, and gender. So for two properties I have given custom names, and for two I have left as it is, so that we can see that it is getting mapped with this name only. Okay, so this is the user, or let me show you the corresponding table in database. Okay, so MySQL client, So I have, these are the some, so databases, so these are the databases that are present. I'm going to use green that I have specified in the URL in YAML file. Use green. I can go ahead and see this. So tables, so it is going to show me the table that are there. Okay, so Hibernate sequence, it gets created automatically when you interact with database. So what, select star from user. So I'm going to fetch the data from the user. So this structure, ID is there, first name is there, last name is there, gender, address, and home address is there. Okay, so home address is by default, so I have not mapped that one, so it will just ignore that one. Okay, so these two entries I already have, so I'll go ahead and fetch the data, so it should return that data. Okay, so this was the mapping. So you do not have to mandatory map all the properties, it can ignore that is not present in the database. Okay, so I have mapped this only, ID, first name, last name, gender, and address only. Okay, so it handles this gracefully, right? So it is not there, it will just ignore that one. So we are done with the user repository, and whatever there is by default I can use, and I can write our own also. One more thing I wanted to explain, so extends. Okay, so when you are running your application, so CRUD repository methods, this interfaces gets implemented automatically by the Spring Data JPA. Okay, so for that one, the methods that are there, save, find by ID and all, they are transactional by default. Okay, so if you want to modify that property, you can write this, like if you want to save here, you can get that, you can get that one, and you can modify that transactional property. Okay, if I go to transactional, and here suppose there are various properties that I can go ahead and see. Okay, mandatory, never, and scoped, and all the, so I can configure that transactional properties, otherwise it will consider the by default one. So just I wanted to show you how to customize that. And on top of that, what is provided by CRUD repository, I can write our own queries also. The steps will go like this. So I have to write a method in interface, just just write that method, implementation will be generated by the Spring Data JPA automatically. So here, what I want to do, I'm going to update the address of particular user, and what I want to update, address. So this is the query that I have written, update user. So remember, this update user, this should be the name of the entity that you are mapped with. Okay, this should not be the name of the table, and it is case sensitive. Okay, so keep this in mind. So it should be user, so I have given it user. If you give it a small case, considering that you want to directly write mention that name of the table, so it will create issue. You go ahead and try out that what exception it is giving, and then setting address and this name ID. Okay, so it will execute this query for me. Modifying means it is going to modify some data in under update. I am going to update, so this modifying is mandatory. If you are not giving this, it will create issue. If you are going to just fetch the data, then this is not necessary. Okay, transactional, this annotation is also necessary, because by default it considers all the interface methods as transactional. So if you are ignoring any of these annotations, so it will create issue while startup. So whatever you write inside this query, it gets validated at the startup time only. Okay, as I told you, this should be the name of the entity that you are writing here, and if you are trying to mention the name of the table, it will throw an exception. Okay, so let me go ahead and demonstrate this. User repository, just I'm going to name directly the table, so it will create some issue. Let me go ahead and start the application and see in console. So while startup, you can inspect the console also at each line what it is doing. User management application, it is about profiles. No profiles are there, so That's not an issue. Repository configuration delegate, and it is doing this. Tomcat web server initialized, and this is Hibernate version. It is giving okay common dialect, factory bean, context bean, and Hikari. For data source, it is using Hikari connection, Hikari pool. Okay, so shutdown initiated, shutdown completed. It is shutting down. Okay, so let's see what the error is. User controller and come down and see. Yeah, exact error is error creating bean with name user repository, invocation of init method failed, illegal argument exception, validation failed for query for method. This it is exactly pointing out where the error is. Update address, here the problem is. Failed for query for method this, because whatever you have written, it is not able to map this with the any entity that you have. So if I write is user correctly and start is, so it will work properly. So see, our application is started at this port 1 and is this context path that we mentioned in YAML file, string data demo. Let's go ahead and open the Swagger URL and interact with the endpoints. This is the Swagger UI that I can see. So here are the endpoints that I have: add user, get user, update, delete, get all. First of all, see all the users what are there. Execute this. It is not taking any input. So yeah, it is giving me all the users that are there in database. ID with 4 first name and this gender, and see whatever mapping I have defined. So in this MySQL table, I have one more column, home address. It is not returning that because it is going to return the object entity that you have defined in your application. Okay, so this is get all users. So let's try each one by one. So first there are existing users, so let's go ahead and delete that one. So it is expecting the ID. So what IDs we have? 4 and 5. So suppose I want to delete 4. Okay, execute this. User with ID 4 deleted. So let me go ahead and access this. Okay, so user ID with 4 deleted. Okay, let me go ahead and add some user into the database. Okay, so let me take this sample one, add user, try it out and write it here. So ID I do not have to pass it because it is auto incremented. Okay, suppose Sheldon Cooper and mail, and I want New York. I'm giving this address New York. Okay, so it will add the data into database. Okay, so let's go ahead and execute it. Okay, so 201 status code 20 means response header is there, so it is created. So if you remember user management, so it is returning exact location from where I can get this user which just gets added. If I go ahead and directly hit this URL, I'll get the data, first name, last name, and this, and I can see in database also. Okay, yeah, 5 6 Shelton is there. Okay, so we have seen get all users, delete user, and add user. Let's go ahead, and I have also fetched the single user, and let's go ahead and update the user. So what ID I want to update? Suppose I want to update the user which has ID 6, which is Sheldon Cooper, and address what I want to give. So give the full name, New York, USA. So remember earlier we had given this NY only. So if I hit this query, this address will be updated, executed. So new address for user ID 6 is this. Go ahead and select this, select start from user, Sheldon Cooper address got updated. Okay, if I see the console also, it is printing the proper loggers that I have written in our user service IMPL. Okay, so we have seen the by default one, get, update, delete, and you can go ahead and call other methods also. Count how many exist by ID, check if it is there or not, find all, and this. You can access the green learner git repository. Okay, so you can come here and you can go to that microservices repository. and you will see the, I'll post that code into here, and you can get that code here. Okay, so play around with the code that you have. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video. Till then, bye bye.